This event happened a long time ago, when a pack of cigarettes and a gallon of gas both cost less than $1, and it only cost a dime to use a payphone. It was a time when hitchhiking across town was okay, with the occasional warnings from older folks that Ted Bundy might be our next ride. I was 17 at the time. I worked at a fast food restaurant in the valley along with two of my friends, Dottie and Jolene. We all dreamed of taking a trip together and imagined how much fun it would be to hitchhike up the coast of California, seeing where we would end up. We were so naive. One day, the place we worked at got robbed. The detective said it was most likely an inside job, so we all had to take a lie detector test. Of course, we passed, but the owner fired everybody and started over. Years later, we found out it was his own son. Anyway, we all got paid our 2 checks and thought we were rich. This was our opportunity. We didn't think Jolene was serious because her parents were wealthy and she had everything. Why would she want to leave all that behind while we were both staying in a friend's garage with nothing to lose? But she surprised us and said she was all in. We started out early the next morning, and boy were we excited. We didn't know what we were doing or how to get anywhere, but we were having fun. All day long we sang songs and got rides. It was pretty much a dream come true. The first night we sat in a diner until morning, and then we were at it again. We would take turns standing with our thumbs out while the others napped under a tree, but we stayed close to the towns because it felt safer. Thinking back, none of this was safe. It started to get dark and we hadn't had a ride in a while. Jolene began to miss her mom and her clean bed, but we didn't miss anything, except for an umbrella because it started to rain. We didn't count on rain. We were so tired, but we just kept walking, hoping to get a ride. It was looking pretty bleak until we saw a guy in an old truck. I had a bad feeling about him, but Jolene begged us to take this ride because her feet hurt. So we did. He was just supposed to take us to the next town. What harm could it be? It was a bench seat, so we all piled in. Jolene jumped in first, then Dottie, and I went by the door. Dottie and I were so tired from standing most of the day, so we both dozed off. We must have been out for a while when I heard Jolene make a strange sound. I cracked open my eyes and saw no streetlights, and we were going very slowly. I nudged Dottie and we both looked over at Jolene. She was sitting straight up stiff, with tears streaming down her face. This guy's arm was around her holding a small knife to her neck. He was steering with his knee and his other hand was down her pants. Just then Dottie yelled out, "Oh my God!" It startled the man, so he straightened his arm and pinned Dottie's throat to the seat. While all this was happening, I felt around in my backpack for my knife, not taking my eyes off him. I reached over and grabbed the stick shift, slamming it in reverse. The truck made a loud crunching sound, and we all flew into the dash. The truck hit a guardrail, so we jumped out. The guy hit his head pretty badly, but he started yelling at us like it was our fault. I noticed that he was wearing a wedding ring. At that point, the girls were both screaming to go, but I just had to. I jumped back into his truck, grabbed the small knife I found on the seat, and stabbed him right in the groin. Of course, he tried to hit me while calling me names, but I showed him my big knife and said, while crawling out backward, "Explain that to your wife." He drove off, chugging and grinding down the road. We found ourselves in the middle of nowhere. We could hear the sound of his truck fading as it got further away. Jolene fell to her knees and cried. We tried to comfort her, but we were all in shock. There was nothing but rolling hills and winding roads for miles, and it was still raining. The roads were only lit by a full moon occasionally peeking through the clouds. I felt responsible for these two girls, but at that moment I felt helpless. We walked for a long time, even taking turns carrying Jolene. After a while, a car passed us. I was so tired I forgot to put out my thumb. Dottie got mad at me for letting it pass, but then it stopped not too far ahead and sat there for a minute while we were still walking. Dottie asked what I thought he was doing. I didn't know, so we approached slowly. Jolene saw it was a man and started to walk backward, saying no. I didn't blame her. We were all pretty freaked out by the last guy. He was a nicely dressed man in a Cadillac. He asked what we were doing out there in the rain. We told him what had just happened, and he promised us he wasn't a creep. He told us we could all sit together in the back and that he wouldn't mind taking us to the next town to get something warm to eat. It was our only choice, so we went with him. He ended up taking us to a coffee shop. The waitress gave us some towels to dry off. He seemed nice enough. He said he was a successful music artist and had written music for big movies. He told me some of his work, and I knew it well, since my sister was a theater art major and had practically raised me watching musicals. The phone was broken, so he said he only lived about 45 minutes away and would be glad to let us use his phone and stay there for the night. After breakfast, he would give us a ride wherever we needed to go. I was mostly concerned about getting Jolene somewhere she felt safe. Remember, we were only 16 and 17 out in the world for the first time. We finished our food and got in the back of his car. Jolene slept in my lap as I stroked her hair, and Dottie sat wide-eyed the whole way there. We arrived at his house and were pleasantly surprised that he was telling the truth. It was a big, beautiful 2-story mansion with a piano, studio equipment, and a film screen showing the movies he was working on. He gave us some dry clothes of his. Since he was short, they almost fit us. Jolene fell asleep on the couch. We talked for a while. It was starting to get really late, so I asked him where we were going to sleep. He told me the room at the top of the stairs on the left, and that we could leave our bags on the counter. I was kind of reluctant but too tired to care. It was a medium-sized room with one big king-size bed calling our names. We shut the door and he flew up the stairs and opened it, saying, "This door has to stay cracked." Weird, but whatever. Dottie got up and went to the bathroom. When she came back, she shut the door. He instantly opened it and said, "It needs to stay cracked." Dottie got close to me in the bed and whispered in my ear, "He's standing in the hall." I asked her what she meant. She said he was just standing in one spot, twirling his mustache, staring at our door. Just then, Jolene sat straight up, jumped out of bed, and said she was going to be sick. She ran to the bathroom and the door slammed shut. Waiting for her to come back, we started to worry. I got up and went to the door, but it was locked. We banged on the door, but didn't hear anything. We looked around the room for something to open it, but the room was bare. We tried to listen for our friend, but heard nothing. Dottie started to cry, and I wanted to cry too. An hour or so later, we heard a car pull up. We couldn't see it from the room, and just as soon as it came, it left. Then we heard him come up the stairs. He opened the door and said, "I said leave it open." We bombarded him with questions about where our friend was and what he did with her. He just laughed. He said she had called her mother, who picked her up and was pretty mad at us. He said it was funny. That didn't explain why we were locked in there, but he said the door was probably jammed and we should try to get some sleep. He left the door cracked. We were scared. Dottie and I lay there waiting for morning. I told her the first thing we would do is get our bags and run. She agreed. Then he came in. He stood there looking at us. We didn't know what he was going to do, and my knife was downstairs in my bag. He climbed up on the bed and told us to move over so he could lie down. We reluctantly moved. He took off his pants, leaving only his underwear, and plopped down between us. He told us to get closer. Dottie started to shake. All these thoughts were running through my head about how to get out of this. Then it hit me. I remembered an old movie I had watched with my sister. In it, a girl in a similar situation started laughing at a gangster coming at her. She made fun of his size and he stopped. So that's what I did. I started to laugh and make fun of him. Dottie looked at me like I was insane, but it seemed to be working, so she joined in. He started to cry and say weird things like how he was a bad boy. Oh my gosh, were we scared. While his eyes were covered by his hands, I nodded to Dottie, and we both jumped up and ran out. I slammed his door and we ran downstairs, grabbing our bags. The door was locked, so we ran out the back sliding door by the pool. We saw him coming down the stairs. Dottie screamed, "Where do we go?" We threw our bags over the back wall and jumped. We didn't know he lived on a steep hill, so we rolled almost to the street below. Both of us were cut and scraped, but we made it to a payphone. Still having doubts that Jolene had made it out alive, we called her mother. Thankfully, Jolene was home safe, but she never knew when she left to tell anyone we were in trouble. We called a friend and he came all the way out there to pick us up. We never called the police because we figured he was a big shot. We didn't think anyone would believe us at the time, and we couldn't find his house again even if we tried. But I will tell you one thing, we never hitchhiked again. It happened in my bedroom when I was 10 years old. I always had trouble sleeping and spent most nights tossing and turning. I was a horror film fanatic as a child, and being scared was something I didn't have much experience with. I was not afraid of the dark, nor was I easily swayed by strange sounds or odd encounters. I did, however, know when to get the hell out of a situation or to find a trusted adult. I always slept with my closet doors open, which will become significant later in the story. I should also mention that my family home was in a heavily wooded area, in what some might call the middle of nowhere. One night around 1 a.m., I awoke to a sound coming from underneath my bed. It sounded like one of my cats was scratching themselves with one of their feet, or doing something that caused a thumping beneath me. I had heard this same sound many times before, and its source had always been one of my fuzzy friends. So this time I didn't look. I closed my eyes and tried to go back to sleep. I turned over onto my left side, which left me facing the wall against which my bed was pressed. I heard the sound again, and thinking that my kitty was directly beneath me, I said, "Good night." I was able to fall asleep once more. The next time I awoke, I saw a surreal and shocking scene. The sheet and comforter on my bed were no longer covering me. I saw a man standing over my bed, poking me with his finger. And the way he did it was truly horrifying. It was not the way a child would poke a friend in jest. It was as if he was touching another human being for the first time, exploring the sensation of his index finger jabbing at flesh. What I saw was so unbelievable, so impossibly strange that I thought I must be dreaming. I tried desperately to wake myself from this nightmare, but I could not. The poking continued. He poked at my chest, my belly, my legs, and my arms. Paralyzed and terrified, I yelled, "Wake up!" With that, the man threw himself to the floor and closed his eyes, as if trying to make me believe he was asleep or even dead. I have no idea. It was at this moment that I realized I could not have been dreaming. Somehow I found the ability to move. I jumped from the top of my bed over the man lying on the floor and ran toward my parents' room. When I got to their bedroom door, something came over me. I told myself this was impossible. There was no way someone could have entered our home without breaking in. because we always kept every door and window locked at night. I had seen many strange things in my home while either falling asleep or waking up. By the third or fourth time after speaking with my mom or dad about it, I knew it was my mind playing tricks on me. Plush toys do not have the ability to turn and whisper to each other. Do not ask why, dear reader, as I have no explanation. But I turned away from my parents' bedroom door and decided to check the house for a break-in. What I found was nothing unusual. No broken windows, no busted locks, no damaged doors. I assured myself that I must have been dreaming or hallucinating, blaming my obsession with horror films. I made my way down the long, dark, narrow hallway to my bedroom. I peeked inside and saw no one. I turned on the light, got down on the floor just outside the doorway and looked under the bed. Nothing. I checked both of my windows for signs of a break-in. Both were closed and locked. I knew it. I was seeing things. I crawled back into bed and decided to watch some TV to calm myself down and distract from thoughts of the terrifying dream or hallucination I had just had. I turned on the TV, flipped to a channel with a seemingly boring program. This always helped me become sleepy, and put the remote on my bedside table. I was lying on my right side, facing away from the wall I mentioned before. As I lay there, my eyes began to adjust to the dark room, illuminated only by the faint light of the TV screen. Just beyond the TV, I saw something that made my heart sink. Inside my closet, with one of the doors now slightly closed, I saw the man standing perfectly still, facing the wall, hiding, waiting for me to fall asleep, I imagined. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I sat and stared at the man in my closet for what seemed like minutes, but it was likely only a few seconds. I quietly got out of bed, hoping he wouldn't notice, and that my dad could catch him hiding in the closet. I made my way to my parents' bedroom door again, staying as quiet as I could, and went inside. I shook my dad and my mom at the same time, and when they awoke, I said, "Don't make a sound, there's someone in my closet." My parents both jumped up and said, "What?" I repeated myself and asked them to call 911. My mom immediately picked up the phone. Neither parent doubted me because I had always been honest. They knew there was no way I was making this up or mistaken. I'm sure the look on my face made it clear this was really happening. My dad told my mom and me that he was going to look and urged us to stay in their bedroom and lock the door. We did. At this point, I was beyond scared. I didn't know what the man was capable of, whether he had a weapon or whether my dad was safe. I just stood in the room with my mom and cried. After what felt like hours, my dad knocked on the door and told me it was him, and that it was okay to open the door. My mom unlocked it and let my dad inside. I asked, "Did you get him?" My dad looked at me with the most unsettling, confused look imaginable. "There's no one there." I assured him there had been a man in my room poking me. My dad said he had checked every inch of the house and found no one. He had also checked the doors and windows just as I had. Then it hit me. He must have had a key. As soon as I said this, my parents looked at each other in absolute terror. Our nearest neighbor, a trusted and beloved friend whom we considered a family, had a key to our house because she had babysat me regularly since I was a toddler. She was the only person outside our immediate family with a key. Soon after, the police arrived, took statements, checked around the property, and left. None of us got any sleep that night. The next day, my dad went to the neighbor's house and asked if she knew where her key was. She said yes, but when she went to show him, it was missing. Her home had no signs of a break-in, and she always kept her doors and windows locked. My parents changed all the locks on our doors and decided never to give a key to anyone again, except in an emergency. I never discovered the identity of the man who lurked in my bedroom that night. The event left me traumatized, and it took a long time to accept what had happened and move on. My sleeping trouble turned into full-on insomnia, and for about a decade I could not sleep without a light on. It has been 20 years since that night, and apart from my parents, I have never told anyone until now. Writing this has been very cathartic, and I am glad I found this community. My heart goes out to anyone who has suffered trauma, and I hope you are all able to find peace within yourselves. I'm a 25-year-old woman and have been living with my boyfriend for the last 6 years. This happened about 4 years ago. I spent a lot of time online and still do, where I met many interesting people. A lot of them had rough backstories, but I always offered a listening ear and tried to support them. I should mention that I have autism and can be pretty naive, so I don't always recognize bad situations right away. I met a 24-year-old guy from Australia, I'm from Europe, who had just broken up with his girlfriend. He said she was emotionally unstable, and that their relationship ended with her threatening to take her own life. He told me he couldn't handle it anymore. I talked to him a lot about it and tried to help him cope. We started gaming together online and I began to see him as a friend. But after a while I started noticing that he was acting as if I were his girlfriend. I brushed it off at first because he knew I already had a boyfriend, and I thought maybe I was just misunderstanding his kindness. I'm famous for being oblivious to that kind of thing. And then he started telling me that I should break up with my boyfriend. He went on long tangents and even sent me emails claiming that my boyfriend was like his ex-girlfriend, that he was abusing me both mentally and physically, making my life a living hell, and that he was going to kill me one day. All of it was completely absurd, and I kept trying to explain that to him. Eventually, it became clear that he really did think of me as his new girlfriend. He told me we were going to spend the rest of our lives together and that he would make sure of it. He was convinced that me telling him to stop and leave me alone was all orchestrated by my boyfriend, and that I was actually being held hostage. Luckily, he didn't know my full name, or so I thought, or where I lived. But then I started getting messages from random accounts with pictures of people covered in blood saying, "This is going to happen." This went on for a while. I begged him to stop, but he kept pushing. I blocked him, but he kept making new accounts to contact me. So I decided to delete my account on that site altogether, hoping it would end. But then I started getting messages on Facebook. I never told him my full name, and even then my Facebook was extremely private. I used a family nickname and only had relatives added since most lived far away. My boyfriend didn't even have a Facebook account. Despite that, he made around 150 pages and profiles all directed at me, filled with disturbing pictures of self-harm, telling me that it was my fault. It seemed like he made it his full-time job to message me across every platform. He even found my YouTube account and followed me there. Eventually, he started sending photos of receipts showing that he sold his school books, and later, receipts that he had bought one plane ticket to the airport near where I live, plus 2 tickets back to Australia. He sent photos as proof that he had quit school, quit his job, and moved his belongings into storage. He said he was coming to save me from my boyfriend, and that he was going to kill him and take me back to Australia so I could be safe. By now, I had blocked every Facebook account under his name, which was unfortunately very common, and deleted nearly all my other online accounts. Even when I used different names, he somehow found me. Then came the day he posted pictures from the airport on my Facebook wall, along with photos from inside a plane with the logo of my country's official airline. He started mentioning details about the actual building I lived in, which was terrifying. At the time, I lived in a maintenance apartment inside a large, mostly empty industrial building that had only one other office. I was technically on the lease as a maintenance person, but that was just for legal reasons. The entire building was open to me and there weren't any other people living nearby. He couldn't possibly have known that. But now he was talking about how perfect that setup was for his plans. My boyfriend knew everything that had happened by then and suggested we contact the police for advice. The police couldn't do much but told us that if we were scared, we should go somewhere else. So we stayed at my parents' place for the night. When we came back the next day, since we both had work and school, there were police cars outside the building. The owner told us someone had broken in. The intruder had tried to enter the office next to our apartment, which triggered the alarm and alerted the police. At that point, I wanted to know if it had been him. It wasn't hard to reach him. He was already messaging me again from multiple new accounts. My boyfriend contacted him and convinced him to have a webcam chat. When the guy turned his camera on, I immediately recognized a landmark from our city through the window behind him. I silently panicked, but didn't let him know I was there. My boyfriend spent more than 7 hours talking to him. The guy was furious and still certain that my boyfriend was going to kill me. Nothing could change his mind. My normally calm boyfriend was starting to lose patience because of the guy's twisted reasoning. He had even copy-pasted old chat conversations and spun them into bizarre narratives. Eventually, the guy said he was disgusted with me, threw insults at my boyfriend, and claimed that if I insisted on staying with him, I deserved whatever was going to happen. He said he wouldn't mourn me because I had ruined his life, my own life, and the lives of our children. I only heard from him one more time after that. He sent me a short video of himself in a hospital, saying he had tried to kill himself. He said it was my fault, that I had brought darkness to the earth instead of light, like you promised. He often said strange things like that. Weird spiritual statements about promises I had supposedly made. I was scared again for a while, but then it finally went silent. Even though it's been years, I still worry that he's not over it and might come after me. But as far as I know, his parents had him committed to a psychiatric care home. I learned that about a year later when his older brother finally responded to one of my Facebook messages asking him to check on his brother, because he clearly wasn't okay. Apparently, my messages had been stuck in his spam folder. Mr. Crazy Guy, please, let's never ever meet. Several years ago, I was living in an apartment by myself. I was living paycheck to paycheck, so the place wasn't exactly in the nicest part of town. Since it was a rougher area, there were quite a few homeless people nearby. One particular guy was always hanging around the apartment building. My apartment had been added onto an older building, so I had a separate outside entrance that opened directly into my unit, rather than going through the main entryway. There was a hedge near the front of the building with a small gap through it, a shortcut I'd take to reach the front of the building and get my mail. If the creepy guy wasn't standing near my door, he was usually near that hedge. I worked late shifts and usually got home around midnight. One night, I had just gotten home and was about to unlock my door when I heard a shout. "Hey, little sister." That was what the homeless guy had decided to call me. He asked me for something. I think it was a cigarette. And I told him no. I was glad I hadn't unlocked my door yet, because then he asked if he could use my bathroom, and he looked like he might have tried to push his way in if I'd opened it. I told him no and quickly said that I'd forgotten to stop at the store, so I had to leave. I went to a 24-hour diner, had a couple of cups of coffee, and waited a while before going home. When I finally got back, he wasn't anywhere in sight. so I rushed inside and locked my door. The next day, when I went to get my mail, I walked through the hedge as usual. I happened to glance down and notice several empty travel-sized bottles of shampoo, the kind you get at a hotel. There were also a bunch of used cotton swabs scattered around. I thought it was weird, but didn't think much of it at the time. The following night, I was lying in bed getting ready to sleep when someone started pounding on my door. Little sister, I need to use your bathroom." All of the lights in my apartment were off, so I decided to stay quiet and ignore him. A few hours later, around 3 in the morning, I woke up and went to the kitchen for a drink. I noticed my cat's food bowl was empty, so I turned on the light to find the bag of food in the cabinet. I filled the bowl, started walking back across the kitchen, and then, suddenly, the lights went out. I stepped outside to see if the whole neighborhood had lost power. At 3 in the morning, it was pitch dark, so there was no way to tell. Too tired to deal with it, I just went back inside and went to bed. When I woke up the next morning, the power was still off. I called the electric company and they told me there weren't any outages in my area. So I went downstairs to the utility room, which wasn't secured at all. Every breaker for my apartment had been flipped to the off position. I wasn't sure why that would have happened, but I didn't think too much about it. At least not until I got back upstairs. When I went into my bathroom, I flipped the light switch and noticed something immediately. The toilet seat was up. Remember, I'm a woman living alone. On the sink counter, there were 2 empty hotel-sized shampoo bottles and several used cotton swabs. I called the police. They figured that the creepy guy had gone down and switched off my breakers. When I stepped outside to check, he must have slipped into my apartment. The officers asked if anything was missing, but nothing was. They dusted for prints on the door to the breaker box and collected the bottles and swabs as evidence. Nothing ever came of that, but I never saw my big brother again.